12 giant iPhoto libraries from like different computers over the years. Which has been working
on air is live, so I'm told. We're probably starting a little late because I had to square away my tea. Anyway, welcome everyone. Thanks for showing up. Apparently it's raining. I think the rain, so I didn't know it's raining. But yeah, I was talking to some people ahead of starting today and talking about the topic. I think it was all the topics that I put down. I don't remember where I came up with those, but I know they popped into my head at some point. Questions, news, anything before we get started? No? All right, good. Well, the first thing on the topic that I had was how heavy-handed is your admin style? And I don't remember what made me think of this, but it's definitely, you see a wide range of people that let people bring their own device and kind of do whatever, all the way through no, we're buying and controlling your entire experience. I'm really curious where everyone kind of lands on that spectrum.
I think some of it comes down to what environment you're in.
Yes, I was just going to say, I mean, that's probably really different for people on staff somewhere versus consulting. But actually, so you're in the consulting space, right?
No, hospital.
Oh, okay.
So that's where
it
defines how much you can open up and defines what's on the devices and how much we need to control what's on the devices.
Yeah, that's a big difference. And schools, I imagine, probably be really simple.
I think hospitals might be a little bit more strict because of the HIPAA compliance.
Yeah, sure.
HIPAA compliance requires some pretty specific things, I think.
Yeah.
It's been a while since I worked with anybody that was in medicine, but the last time I did it was very specific.
So then that, for me, raises the question, you have to, and are these laws around what can go on a device?
And then how it's protected, yeah.
Right, and how it's protected. Do you get complaints from end users based on that?
Absolutely.
Or do they kind of understand, oh, no, this is...
No, they understand it, but they also want to be able to function. And so if you put too many roadblocks in front of them, they're going to complain because if it's too cumbersome and they can't do anything.
So would you say the laws and things that are in place like actively prevent people from
getting work done?
Getting work done.
Depending on what system it is, yeah.
Right.
Or people just stop using it because it's too cumbersome that to go through the hassle of getting through those blocks, the secure blocks, it's just not worth their time, and they'll either do it another way or they just won't do it.
That's pretty common.
Yeah.
Not only technology,
yeah.
but people need to get stuff done, and
right.
The system isn't working, they go around the system.
Right. But in this case, it's to protect the leakage of data that the whole community at large is supposed to be protected.
Right.
They're supposed to be compliant with protecting that data, whether it's on a piece of paper or whether it's in a computer.
So give me an example of that. Now, I'm curious because I'm kind of ignorant to that.
So
give me an example of what?
Anything that has PHI, which is patient information, has to be protected and encrypted and
then what do you do to achieve that end?
So right now we push everything through Citrix. So Citrix is kind of our block. So our whole...
So the Mac is kind of a dumb terminal.
More or less. In some senses, yeah. For the most part of most of our fat systems, that is where all of the information is housed. So to get in there, they have to use Citrix, and that becomes very cumbersome on an iOS device because the current Citrix that we're using doesn't allow you to go directly in or quickly into Citrix. We have an older version of Citrix that becomes cumbersome on how you get into Citrix.
I've lost track of Citrix. I used to use it, be a big fan of it, and I've forgotten about it. I didn't even think that they're probably doing something for iOS devices.
They do a lot of stuff, and the current version makes it better, much better than older versions. Older version, the one that we have implemented, is just you go on our website to log in, Then you're launching the app, and then in the app you're launching a server app.
Yeah.
So you got already three steps to the login process.
You have to download that ICA file.
No, it
not
takes
the
the
ICA
ICA file and opens it into the app.
Yeah.
And then it runs off the app. But that whole process is so long and lengthy that people give up.
Interesting. So, do you do anything that will stop someone with a laptop or iOS mobile device? Let's say they don't launch Citrix, right? Do you do anything to stop them from taking notes right on the device, just like quickly typing? Does that happen, do you think?
Yeah, people do.
Yeah.
And they know they're not supposed to because they go through a HIPAA compliant process that teaches them training on how to protect the information. And so they're not supposed to, and they're told they're not supposed to. So, I mean, we protect the Macs as much as we can. We file vault them. It's pretty much as far as we can get. Eventually, we're going to stand up all of our tools to do more monitoring, do more protection, but it's still going to come down to it still being on the device.
They think that they can intercept it at the network layer. They've put things in place to be able to do so. That's a much more scalable solution if devices stay inside the network. We come from the angle that if we can proactively put stuff that works over the WAN to begin with, when it comes to management period, then whatever they ask us to implement will at least have an effective way to manage and or maintain. So that if they say, hey, new controls are this can't be running or this needs to be added, well, how do I effectively do that when I've got 5+ campuses, hundreds of clients where I just don't know where they'll be at any given time?
Yeah.
But it's also like we proactively, therefore, add things that we might not have, just so that we know that we have a vendored version of it. Like we've said, okay, quality assured, they won't think, oh, they need this and go to try to install it. We'll already have provided it, therefore, so that they don't have to click the fake Flash downloader and get themselves owned. There's stuff that we have to think about historically have been obstacles that, like, the marketing department sends the C-level people this thing that only plays in freaking Silverlight, you know, like, stuff happens, we get in front of that, therefore, in ways that it gives us extra things to do, and it seems frivolous for security controls that you would normally, therefore, want to limit as much exposure as possible, but instead we're at least making it a known quantity, that it's on our radar to control, rather than having it be something that's just out there that we will get surprised by when the marketing department says another new one.
Hey,
But therefore, it's like a mix. It's sometimes we're protecting ourselves by not having to, by therefore being very light about what restrictions we are enforcing, so that we can just add stuff later, because no one else is saying the policy about restriction on the Macs, to proactively adding things that we therefore have to watch the ball.
Is it segregated? Is there much of a PC infrastructure there, and
18,000 versus a couple hundred.
Windows 7 will be through the end of next year, by all indication.
Yeah.
And thank goodness, couldn't come sooner.
So I'm also curious about remote access. Do you do anything?
Citrix.
Citrix.
Well,
totally.
By the way, yeah.
You can add it to make it do a VPN tunnel as well. So
Yeah, that's how we have it.
Okay.
That's our VPN. Ugly as it is, it's our VPN.
It's what it is.
For our accounting users, there are about 10 users on Windows machines. We set them up with Citrix. So we've set up their machines to, with the kiosk mode in Internet Explorer. They sign into Okta, which is an SSL service. Then they get to Citrix, and then they log in.
Yeah.
And then they go down. But same deal for remote access, Citrix.
And not everybody has remote access. It's only limited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have pretty tight remote access policy as well, but we don't use Citrix. We use
An actual
remote access VPN into Cisco ASAs worldwide. So depending on where you work and what you do, you get a specific level of granular access remotely. But we don't. I mean, outside of controlling who can access remotely, I mean, we don't really have that much in the way of like limitations. Because once you're inside the network, the same credentials apply that you would use in the building, so we don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, I don't know. My company tends to handle security in, well, let's put it this way, outside of myself and the people on my IT team, there is nobody handling security. It is sort of a pretty laissez-faire attitude generally. It's not, we don't come under any particular governmental regulations.
So what's the environment?
It's a design firm. It's bill ourselves as the world's largest independently owned design consultancy.
But what about the proprietary information?
Well, proprietary information is definitely protected. There's only certain proprietary information that is even accessible from a standard machine anyway, especially once you leave the LAN. Again, you have to be granted access, specific access through a VPN. And laptops tend to have File Vault 2 protection, the ones that stay in-house and are big iMacs.
So File Vault 2, that's all fine, but what happens to the person that goes off and downloads some software on their own, or...
They have standard level user accounts. They don't have admin user accounts. The laptops are an exception to that. We kind of hope to, I'm in the midst now of doing the whole monkey auto package, et cetera, rollout as a way of trying to be able to grant them, something like a self-service option, rather than having to have admin rights on the laptops, which is the current situation. Those laptops have admin rights because they could be in a totally different time zone where they have no support from us, and need to download and install something to get on somebody else's secure network or whatever it is to do a presentation. They have to have those rights.
Yeah, or a way to get those rights.
Yeah.
Somehow.
And then we have a very specific subclass of information that is protected at a whole other level. We don't fall under like OSHA regulations, but we do some things for stuff that kind of falls under, I don't even want to say what organization it is that we're securing it for, because I probably shouldn't, but they have pretty specific guidelines for certain projects that we work on, where we, it falls under the U.S. government's oversight, or certain private organizations that we work for under their sort of oversight. We have to fall into some pretty specific security guidelines, things that isn't even accessible, things that aren't even accessible over the VPN, even if you have access. They're really firewall.
I guess I'm really curious mostly about just like management, device management. Does anyone here just like totally crush end users' like hopes of ever running anything or storing their personal information?
No. We're a sales organization, so we have no that we need to meet. I am very liberal. I subscribe to the idea that you want to guide the user, not manage the user. You don't want to crush them and put them into this little box. But that's his point of view. He's the extreme end where he's lock it down. It's our hardware. Lock the dock. Disable USB ports. Everything.
Yeah. Wow.
And we did that at first, and it sucked. It was very painful because I was the one who had to hear from everybody.
So does he have any reasoning behind this? He might say lock USB ports because there are attacks against USB.
Well, it's under the assumption that someone could download something from a file server, put it on a USB key, and do whatever they see fit. But they could email themselves that file. They could do whatever there's a million ways. If you're determined, if there's a will, there's a way. And I told him that point, and we scaled back some of the stuff. Right now we're in the process of redoing our dock configuration, as silly as it sounds, because I think you should be able to add your own apps to your dock. That's just me,
Yeah.
Use your computer, enjoy it, get your work done however you see fit. His main thing with the dock was that people were removing items unknowingly, And they went, oh, I don't have Safari anymore. It's deleted.
Yeah.
So I said, oh, there's this tool, DocuTel. So
Sounds like a genius.
it just adds the items that are supposed to be there at every login. So that's the way that we're going to go from now on. Instead of, oh, it's doc. You can't resize. You
So
can't
I think we do something similar, right? We do an initial. We leave the stock doc alone as it is, but we add like 2 or 3 things to it just so people kind of know they're there. But then we don't manage it past that. If they want to drag things off, yeah, that's up to them.
Yeah, it has reduced the number of tickets of, hey, I don't have access to my file shares anymore.
Oh yeah.
But
they don't do that.
I think the method that we've come up with now is, because just log out, log back in, and we'll be there.
Huh, interesting.
People have been giving admin rights over and over and over, and so now there's a mess. So there is no standard by way of IT, and now that we're moving to Windows 7, they're going to try to clean that process up. So now on the Mac side, we're going to try to come in on the tail end of that and say, we're doing it the same way they're doing it. We're locking it down. But then we're also going to be flexible because we're doing Monkey, and so we're going to be able to open it up the right ways. Give them as much flexibility, but then still protect and lock them down to stay.
So you mentioned Monkey, getting into Monkey and the optional installs. So I think from our experience, that's been a huge win in almost every case. With the exception of, I guess we have a large enough fleet that some people say, oh, can you put blah blah blah, package X into optional installs? Well, I don't know, we've never heard that before. How many people are going to use it? 10. Okay, we're not packaging this up for 10 people. You can just
Maintaining it.
Maintain, that's the thing. Then optional installs, then what do? You put something in optional installs, and then there's a security patch or an update, any kind of update for this. And you have to be aware of it and manage it. Yeah, manage it. So actually, there's a
Cast
recipe.
URL or GTFO, huh?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, is anyone using utility that alerts you to app updates? Talk about subscribing to some of these things.
Monkey Server was the original, hey, if you install Mac Update on the client, you can get it in the web interface of what's managing your Monkey Server. And that also pulled in icons and did all sorts of fun and interesting stuff if you want it to run on the Mac.
Right.
But then there's also auto package that does cut the mustard. You guys have a web-based console that you can't necessarily interact with that unless you're doing, I guess, API calls to shove packages if you wanted to automate that process, that endpoint of it.
Yeah.
But you could also just pull it local if you are if you had a vet process that happened offline or outside of that system. But yeah, like auto package is kind of it.
Yeah, sort of a tangent, but obviously that's something that concerns us from a security perspective, right? If you put something onto...
If you immediately make it live, what could go wrong?
Right, so yes, we do have a vetting process.
But I mean, just like when it comes to
outside
actual...
of the Simian server,
we
have a vetting process where you build this package. We've updated it, and it's in the open source release of Simian that you put a package into Simian, description, everything, and before it goes live, someone else besides you needs to
turn the keys.
Yeah.
Pupine Julian was talking about his Trello board. That for whatever reason, they're very into collaborating on when stuff gets released in the way of stuff that they're maintaining across all of the different departments that are their customers. And so they have a QA team, and they hand off to the QA team and their Trello board of, hey, this package has been sanitized for master distribution and placed into Monkey for testing. Hey guys, give us feedback so you can move it in the next stage in the process. And they're vetting it for them.
Yeah.
So it's a very collaborative process that they have the staff to be able to maintain.
Yeah.
That was one of the more interesting parts of his Beyond Thunderdome Mel Gibson talk.
Anyone else on that spectrum?
I mean, we use Absolute Manage, which is fairly similar to what you guys are talking about. we try to give our users basically the way our computer deployment process works is that I'll set up a computer for someone in exactly the same way every time. It's like, okay, this is your computer, here's your email, here's everything, and depending on what they do, they may ask for certain installs, and we use Absolute Manage to install whatever it is that they request, depending on whether or not they need it. So like a common thing for us, we work in fine art, is Photoshop. So like I need Photoshop on my computer. It's like, well, what are you going to do? Like, oh, I want to I want to change the color on this a little bit or whatever. It's like, well, you don't need full-on Photoshop. You need Photoshop elements. It's like, here, this is what you get instead.
That's what we're doing.
Free them licensing, you know.
Yeah, and licenses are crazy with with legacy Adobe products. You can't even get licenses anymore. And they just recently reached out to us and were like, hey, so we want to talk to you about upgrading all your clients to Creative Cloud.
They do.
Yeah, so that's probably going to happen at some point this coming year. But we try to give our users as much leeway as we can. That said, we don't give them admin accounts. They're all standard accounts. But we are pretty receptive to requests, even one-offs. But I have less staff to manage than you guys. A lot of you guys have several hundred users probably. We are at about 100 company-wide, 200 company-wide max. I physically manage about 50 users. So for me, that's really not that hard, and I actually kind
Sounds
of
like
like that.
body work.
Physically manage 50 users.
Well, like the rest of our users are in Zurich and London.
Can't reach out and talk to them.
Yep. So the users that I can reach out and touch are only here in Europe. But it's easier to do one-off management like we do when you have a smaller group of clients to deal with. But our needs are fairly consistent from user to user. Most of them, they surf the internet and they send a bunch of emails, do maybe some image manipulation and edit PDFs. That's really it. I mean, we're not talking about, they're not splitting atoms, they're not, doing anything crazy. So as far as PC or, Mac deployments are concerned, we set things up one way and we kind of allow the users to do what they need to do on a one-off basis. Most of them don't need anything. Most of them are totally fine with what's available in Mac OS. I mean, Preview's a lot more powerful than it used to be, so you don't even need, Acrobat to edit PDFs and sign things anymore, which was a big hurdle for a while when we were still, 10.5 and 10.6. But now in 10.8, I mean, you can do anything you want.
So let me just quickly get back to something that you brought up a little earlier. You said you entered this, and we're running because there's a fairly active discussion in the chat. And Michael Lynn had asked Rich Troughton if he has a self-service item that resets the dock.
Yes, we do.
So you have this thing docutil that's scripted that when someone logs in, it resets the dock.
It's a script that.
Well,
So does it reset
ensures.
Well, does it
content.
reset their dock entirely, or does it just add back what might be missing?
It removes the items we don't want in there, and it adds
Something we don't want in there.
we don't want any maps, iBooks, that crap. Nobody's using it. Nobody's using it. It's just clutter.
What if they re-add it themselves?
Right,
It
that's
will get
That's
removed.
all.
They can
What
still,
if they really
command
want?
space and open it up through. We're not restricting the app.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's.
That's the maps.
Space savvy? Your users can't space savvy, as you put it?
Some maybe, some not so much. But much like the gentleman over there said, we're only using the web browser. We pushed everything to the cloud. We're using Google Apps. We're using Box. We're using Citrix.
So I think maybe that's.
They could get away with just Chrome.
So then maybe here's a slight segue. It's sort of in the same realm. You mentioned, you're looking to do something up and you want to do things that help users. So what is everyone doing management-wise that sort of goes out of their way to proactively help their users? like this DocuTil thing is, it's a pretty good example. Like, and you said it's helped you. Well, look, anything that cuts down on support calls, whether that's you taking support calls, there's dedicated support staff, anything that stops people from going to support is a good thing. I would use very specifically mention that as a metric. Once you start doing that, the support calls on doc-related issues went down. That's a positive thing. What else?
I would consider self-service stores to be proactive. You're not getting a call because you're laying out the things that are available to them, and they can take action on their own.
Yeah, we're heavy into self-serve. We're using Casper Suite, so we put all of our printers in there. Much like you said, we have one configuration. If you need Photoshop, go to self-serve. Grab it. We have to sign a license to you, but that's a whole different story. But heavy on self-serve as far as that goes.
Okay. Anything besides self-serve?
We just try to make all the tools that would be necessary for them available to them in the initial configuration. We also include our management apps that we would need to use should troubleshooting be necessary, so that in the spur of the moment you don't have to install something that you need in order to diagnose an issue. But
how about user-facing documentation?
we have a wiki.
Does that make sense? Does anyone actually use it to end users try to hunt down
We send the
solutions to their problems before they go to you?
My users do not use the wiki ever. They get a call. I get a phone call or an email like, "Hey, how do I?" or "Hey, how does this work?" And I will reply back with a link from the wiki.
Right.
So like, our company closes down for the first 2 weeks of August every year. This year it started. Yeah, it's just a company-wide thing. Every location worldwide closes for 2 weeks. And leading up to that 2-week break, I sent a few reminders like, "Hey everyone, like remember before you leave, set your vacation voicemail with a link to our wiki. Hey, also remember to set your autoresponder for your email with a link to the wiki on how to do it." But my users generally do not go to the wiki first to try to find things.
Yeah.
They don't.
Yeah, I think here it's a balance of like, obviously this is a very blanket statement, right? Not everyone, but the engineers are usually the ones who go off and try to solve all the stuff themselves, and then sales and finance and marketing probably just go down to support person and say, fix this one.
Yeah, we have sort of categories like that too, and a pretty good mix within too. I have people who I don't think have ever opened a support ticket or sent an email to support. They've been with our company for 2 years, don't think it's happened once.
Right.
And then you have people who need help with some extraordinarily basic thing, like, or they'll just be in a situation where it's like they're on a file server and they're working directly off the server with like an Illustrator file or a 16 gigabyte Photoshop file. And even though I've told them approximately 147 times, Adobe's official answer is please don't do that ever. You'll still, the second the server slows down perceptibly, the phone rings like immediately.
Yeah, I get that a lot too.
Yeah, we get people. Thanks. Is there an update for Photoshop? Do you know that's going to fix your issue?
So there's a wide variety, and I find that you need different tools. There's no one tool that's going to get everybody. There's no one way you're going to implement something to help people that's going to be, with very few exceptions, universal. So you kind of have to use a few of them. Some of each pot of spaghetti sticks to a few different people. Some people you can't do anything but try to help them individually as the issue comes up, or groups of people or things like that. But the more of those tools you have in place, as long as they're managed well, they'll get too cumbersome. The fewer overall one-offs you're going to have to do it.
Are we all sort of in the same bucket of thin imaging, and then stuff gets added on top of that, either in bulk or appropriate to a certain user or group or something like that?
We're moving that way, but we're not there yet. We're still monolithic.
But do you have different images for different groups of people? That's the big thing. Like if you just have one monolithic image that goes to every single person, all right, yeah, it works.
What do you mean?
But if you have to maintain multiple groups, and someone says these 5 are going to marketing, these 5 are going to
Now, there's some add-on stuff for accounting, basically, that gets added, but for the most part, everybody in our company is doing design or reviewing design work, so in that sense, we have it easy. But we're still going to go the thin imaging, or even the no imaging model, depending on how much we turn on to like Deploy Studio.
Everyone seems to. I've almost never touched it, but
Deploy
everyone
Studio's
seems
great.
to really love it.
Used it pretty extensively. Yeah, I mean, used it as like a user, not administered the server side of it, but once you get it up and running, it's great.
Did I see on OS 10 server someone's coming up with Deploy Studio replacement that runs on Linux?
Spirit, what's its name? That's Mosin, because he was Ruby
Super
heavy.
hot.
Yeah. Well, you can try his Docker image now.
How far along is it?
I believe his warnings are equals broken, is what it says. He gives like a statement about warnings and then he says equals broken. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't have some functionality that's present. How much of the workflows he's been able to imitate so far, I'm not sure. Because I haven't spun it.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Papine. Sorry, I've been working on the.
That's you?
That's me. You like it?
Like the black orb. Like, what's going on? Is that
Oh,
the image of the Mac Pro?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh. Yeah, it's so great that you can talk to us.
I know, it's awesome, right? It's like the future.
Yeah.
Anyway, I wanted to make a quick comment about about Spirit. I had looked at it very briefly back in a couple months ago, and I didn't have much time. But then when we started to put Docker wrappers around a lot of these services, I gave it a little more of a spin, and it really is pretty feature complete. There's a couple of things that we know that don't work, but like I was able to create workflows, scripts, add computer records. I was able to use Deploy Studio Admin with it pretty much unfettered. It has a couple of issues where you can't rename a script right now, so we'll create the script, but you can't rename it. There's a couple of things like that, but working right now on kind of like wrapping up a full functioning, including like SMB, file sharing, or AFB. I haven't quite figured out which one to use, where I can do a full net boot, have a Deploy Studio runtime, check in with the Spirit server, and basically do a full, or a base image, install a package, apply workflow, and kind of see how it goes there. So it's definitely a lot more feature complete than I thought in the past. So he's working on it, or at least we've kind of like kicked him off to take a look at some of the things that we're missing, because it gets a little easier to install it now that it's in a Docker image versus having to do a lot of manual tinkering to get it to work. So I think that's a good impetus for him to kind of work on the code versus trying to make it easier to install.
Excellent.
He being Mosin. Right?
Yeah, sorry, Mosin. Yes.
Oh, and hi, Pear. I just want to say hi to Pear. That's awesome.
Anyway, thanks for that update. That's really great. And I'll say it's really irrational. I know that I'm going to make a totally irrational statement, but it always bugged me that Deploy Studio
was not open
source. And that, I'll admit that's kind of irrational. It's a tool that's given for free and it works and people really enjoy it, but it was one of these things that don't quite know who's behind it. It just seemed like one day development or whatever would stop. I don't know. I always wanted that tool to be open source. Yes, it's free, but it wasn't open source, and that kind of bugged me. So I'm really excited about that, which is also irrational because I'm probably not going to use it. But I think it's good to run.
It's not going to solve your use case. So
right, it's not my use case. But if I went to some smaller company that didn't have the infrastructure that I have now,
deploying the CS Suite over the LAN, yeah.
Something like that.
Are any of you guys actually using auto damage
Yes.
at this point?
So yeah, we shifted over to auto damage, and I had spoken to Fair. We've been.
Is that what that bug's still open on CanHat's image?
I fixed them internally, and somehow we've never pushed them upstream. Yeah, I think at some point soon, we're just going to kind of put a label on that says we're leaving this here for historical purposes.
Yeah. I mean, Chilcote learned a lot from it.
Yeah, no, there's some good. There's some good stuff, but no, we like auto damage. We would much rather be using
Stu, that's what he called it.
and contributing back to community-supported and active project. I think Canada's image served us in this short gap when there was nothing else, right? Instant image kind of stopped working and fell apart. There was nothing else yet. Anyway.
It's always the concern that I have with some of these. It's hard to tell how big some of these open source projects are. You spend enough time in this community, in IRC, wherever, you get to learn that there's a gajillion people using a few different products. And by a gajillion, I mean all 17 people who actually speak the US 10 server channel. But the concern with some of this stuff is like, what's going to be the next Insta DMG, where you're building up some critical part of your infrastructure, and all of a sudden it breaks, and you need to use some kind of stopgap solution.
You reevaluate how things work every time the new OS version comes out as it's in beta to know what to expect somewhat, but also to just give yourself a fresh chance to evaluate what's going on and what's going to serve the needs of your future. Like how you might want to re-engineer things based on the fact that features are going to be different in the way that, how people use their computers might be different. You'll need to take into account AirDrop, for example, and the fact that you don't want multicast advertisements going out from the machine just because.
Right.
There might be people who are interested in that. But you haven't said anything else.
I was waiting for a better transition.
I was like,
now you
I don't know where to
out.
jump in.
Now we love new people. Introduce yourself. Why are you here? What do you do?
I'm Alan.
Hello.
I work for a consulting firm in the city. We manage probably.
Can you name what consulting?
What?
Can you name what consulting?
Yeah. I suppose. I mean.
Who knows my many names?
Totally.
Yeah, I work for Helix Systems. And, Helix Systems.
Do they specialize in a certain segment? Or?
No, not really. We have various different clients of all different forms. We manage both Windows, Mac, and I currently do the Mac stuff, although I'm lacking quite a bit. We probably have about 200, maybe 220 Mac users. This is throughout all of our clients, and I do everything through Monkey, which was set up before me, but basically kind of standard. We have a thin image, and then I just add in Monkey through our Kaseya agent, and then tell it what group it's in, or manifest, and it just gets everything that it needs for that client.
So, okay, so that was going to be my next question. You have this one sort of master Monkey repository. All of your clients get the same image and look at the same Monkey server, but then they get updates based on their manifest.
Right. So like a lot of the open source and free items, I keep in a generic folder, which all of them get, or if they want them, they can get them. And then all the mandatory items are, I guess, dependent on the client. So if they are X, Y, and Z, then they get certain things, like we do like Acrobat and Office updates. So some of our clients that don't pay for Office, they don't get updates or warnings about them.
How do you keep track of licensing, or you don't deal with that?
I don't really deal with that. Not me personally.
Right. That goes up later.
Or something.
Yeah, usually with what you call it, with our volume licensing purchases, there's only a few of our clients that are actually even getting Office, so I don't really manage it at all.
Okay.
But it's not one-offs.
Right.
Well,
Well, that's even tougher then sometimes. It's like, hey, Microsoft Office volume license, go install it. And then before you know it, you're like, how many are installed? Right? Yeah. How to track that somehow.
Yeah, we can go through and see, like, we use Kaseya, so we can do a little bit of auditing as far as like who has what and about how many.
Right.
We're using Kaseya for a lot of our management, but Monkey has pretty good as far as like reporting we can do, but I don't really use it that much because I'm kind of a noob.
Do you use like Monkey Report PHP or one of those kind of tools to do the reporting within Monkey?
Monkey Web Admin is set up from all indications.
Yeah, I mean, I go through it, but I really don't understand a lot of it. So, like, if it breaks, I'm kind of screwed. But
Sometimes that's the best way to learn.
Yeah,
Is to watch them fall apart.
basically, that's kind
Hopefully
of
not all for all 220 people simultaneously, but
as long as they don't get an alert saying, "Hey, this is broken. We need your attention," then I should be okay. Because then I could just fix it in the background, run Kaseya to update to the new server, and anything.
what's Kaseya?
Kaseya is a management tool for, I guess, anything.
It was like one of the most heavily adopted, I think, for managed service providers because it's kind of WAN focused in the way that you have a gateway to go through to reach out and touch these customers over the internet.
Just register with the DNS.
They would put stuff. They would also do like Bomgar had another thing where you would put like a local management gateway on that local network if you had firewall issues, and you would always therefore have a persistent, pretty great connection to all of those clients. Kaseya had this way where you like take an office, you kind of roll it up and say, hey, you're talking to our Kaseya management server, and they were one of the first ones that really like blazed a trail where that was a very commonly used monitoring, auditing, and management tool.
And for a long time, they didn't have a Mac client.
And deploying them
I
is not
still
fun.
haven't found a good one that does both Windows and Macs on like a really good scale.
Well, I mean, Absolute Manage is cross-platform. There's other tools that are cross-platform
I'm
that are
hearing a
supposed
lot
to be
of
good for
things about
management.
Kaseya's next version, so I'm hoping that there's like
Of the Mac client?
Yeah, I'm just hoping that there's like a little bit more usefulness to it because right now I think all I get out of it is B and C.
If that works.
Yeah, well, when LogVN doesn't work, it better work.
Yeah.
Like we
Double
do a lot
down.
of scripting with it, though. Like I don't know, we do little commands like install certain things or just reboot.
Yeah.
You know, that's probably
The
the
basic.
best things.
Like ARD over the network, I guess, over the WAN, I guess, is possibly paying it too good a compliment. But it's achievable. One of the things to go back to what we were talking about, like a kindness that we give to our customers, like we have, SharePoint. So what could be better than SharePoint for all of our customers? That is the official thing for documentation. We have a fully staffed 24-hour help desk. Like, those functions are fulfilled, so that's kind of nice. Some places don't have that luxury of being able to give them somebody to call after hours. But then also, I think that I have like high hopes, but me finally getting application tracking down, like how many times this has been launched, how long that session was for, to know what people are actively using, because maybe they'll want training on those things. Maybe it's taking them so long to use the program because they haven't found other tools. Maybe.
Well, so we're doing that. But some things are deceptive.
If it gets launched, but then it doesn't actually hit the CPU, or
No, for example, like people launch Chrome and they're going to stay in it all day. So
yeah,
that's like, well, yeah.
those
Right,
like
they're going to launch
that's
their web
like
browser. and
standard
keep it open.
deviation. You just
Right. That's not something that they're launching day. But then there are these little things like, based on like how many times people launch. I think we ran a report recently. I think number 2 applications like calculator, or like calculator's way up there because that's what you do, right? You launch it, you get out of it. Oh yeah, I need something in calculator.
Command space, type in.
Right. Most people don't think about using Spotlight as a calculator, but I guess it makes sense. So,
Put that your next little, bullet to this day.
but anyway, right? So,
Just stay in Chrome.
Or Google it.
Right.
That would be the Google answer.
another
So-
one.
so yeah, some of those things are kind of tough to really suss out, figure out, like, why is this showing up on this report? Does it make sense? Is it because people are having problems, or is it because
Well,
there's something else at work?
Something I was impressed by that Pat GMAC down at Emory University was doing was, therefore, with Absolute Manage, he was able to see that nobody was using Reader at all.
Yeah.
Yoink! No longer getting patches for that, no longer worrying about patching that, and because he had those statistics, he had that information about it, and therefore they have time to focus on other things, like fixing Sikkim when it breaks. They have they've decided that therefore they can look at other things as administrators because they're not worrying about patching gosh darn Adobe applications, of which 5 updates came out today. Which reminds me, 5 updates came out today. Anyway, we'll test those eventually.
Very good. So I think one of the next things I had a question about. I thought, hey, I'll ask that at MacAdmin Monthly. So on iOS devices, right? So OS 10, we get all this great logging information back. You centralize your logs, you send them to Splunk, or you send them somewhere, and you can get good aggregate data. What do you do for iOS devices?
We're a BYOD shop, so people bring their own device. We set them up with mail and contacts, company mail and contacts and calendars, and that's pretty much where our management of mobile devices ends.
Same with our company. So you don't send them a profile or anything. Do you send them a profile that sets that stuff up for
We
them?
have a Carrio mail server currently, and
Right.
you just visit the mail server on their device, and you just say set up my device, and you enter their credentials, and it
Right.
downloads a profile that then installs.
So this is a bit of a tangent, but since we're there, so it's a BYOD system for iOS devices.
Yep.
Is there anything that those devices then can't get to because they're an iOS device, but like something sitting on your corporate network can get to?
Or file servers,
Yeah.
but that's pretty much it. I mean, as far as phones are concerned, we don't store any of our proprietary information on our phones, period. I mean, there's a certain amount of it involved in email, but should a security concern arise, we have the ability to, we'll just change the password
We
on the
talked about
device.
this a little, and there was some iPad app that you guys had that did store that, but you could remotely wipe it.
Yeah.
You could, right?
Artbinder is the one we're talking about. Yeah. You can deauthorize the device.
But Artbinder,
remotely.
does that, it just uses its own authentication to some server, or do you need
Yep.
to have a VPN in place, plus this, plus that?
SSL between the app and Artbinder's servers, and basically the way it works is you set up effectively a catalog, and you tell it which users can access which catalogs, and
Right, but I think the bigger question for me is,
You just shut it down. You just shut it down if there's a concern.
yeah, absolutely. You can deauthorize a device, or you can remove a user, and the next time that they
do you
open
authorize
that,
everyone's device who's gonna, let's say I'm a new employee and I get an iPad and I
By
get
def-
access to Artbinder.
by default, when you first set up Artbinder, it authorizes your device automatically,
Okay.
and it shows up in a giant list of authorized devices, and you can nuke them one by one.
I guess my question was, like, is the only thing stopping me from getting that credentials? Because then I can go, I have my home iPad, or I have my company, I get a second iPad or something. Can I, just with my credentials, then get Artbinder and log into the server and have
Yes.
access to it?
You can, but we
But he still has control over those multiple copies.
Right, uniquely identifying the devices.
correct, and also should a security concern arise, like someone quits or gets fired, we go in and immediately delete their account, and their access is revoked immediately. Like, you open Artbinder on the iPad after you've removed their
I
user.
understand that, but I think
Not accessible.
the concern for me would be, I get this second iPad, I get Artbinder, and I have my credentials, and I can log in, but there's nothing that says, oh, I also need a passphrase or something, or a lock on this iPad, so I leave it, my house or car or something gets broken
Mhm.
into,
The
someone
app
takes this
itself- the app
iPad
itself has
before I report it missing, right? There's this window where someone has access.
But does the
Correct.
app
Does the app
itself
have
has credentials?
Credentials on launch?
No. You can set it up, but we don't turn it on. Most
That
of our
would've been free.
Yeah, because the passwords that we use are fairly complex for obvious reasons, and a lot of them aren't as memorable as our users would like them to be. So we try to minimize
Yeah,
the
that's
amount of
fine.
interaction
it's
and
a good
friction there.
Yeah,
trade-off,
it's a
and I
balance.
get it, but I would still feel like I would
Yeah.
only want to say, yes, I'm authorizing this device, and if someone just had some rogue device, it would not self-authorize.
To be fair,
That's
we set it up once, and honestly, it's a password they like never use. Most people when they either get their devices replaced, get a new device or whatever, they have to call me for their
Yeah.
password anyway. it's Artbinder really only has a specific segment of our products in it anyway. So it wouldn't be catastrophic should someone come upon it. It's not like it doesn't have any sensitive or proprietary information per se. It's literally a catalog of art.
Yeah.
It's not, there's no like mission critical secrets there. So
it's an app by app management. Like we use a board book app for all our board members to get the board books.
yeah,
And you log into that app each time.
Yeah.
And if it hasn't checked in within 7 days to a server, so it has an offline capability. After 7 days, if it doesn't check in, you're out. And it stores your username, but it doesn't store your password. So you're typing in password each time.
Do you enforce passcodes on the devices?
There's no hard and fast rule for it. We encourage people to use passcodes on their devices, and the majority of my users do have them on their phones. iPads less so. A lot of our sales staff don't really use the iPads as an integral part of what they do. It's just there for when they need it, or for instance, like if they were trying to sell art to one of us, right? We would be a lot more receptive to someone on an iPad than someone, doing something a little bit less technical, like a printed version of the artwork, which we do for some of our clients. We print them out a full 8.5 by 11 glossy photo and put it in a folio with a business card, make it very professional looking. But some clients aren't interested in the paper. Some clients are more interested in seeing the technology aspect of it. And some of our sales staff just doesn't like using electronic tools. Like the head of my organization for New York doesn't like using the iPad. He feels like it's a barrier to the sales process. So it's really a matter of personal preference, and we do what we can. So as far as other things are concerned, we do have Meraki devices, and we use their MDM, and we install it on everyone's phones, so that should a phone become lost, stolen, whatever, we can wipe the device should it come back online, right? Which has happened in the past. Someone was traveling, they were in Paris, their phone was stolen, and they didn't have a passcode on the device, and there was a lot of sensitive info on it. Fortunately, we were able to wipe their company email because it was connected through Exchange at the time. But it's not an ideal
I think
situation.
I've mentioned this before, but
It's tough.
you don't get access to anything.
It's tough.
Well, we are this close, really, this close, around the corner, getting the knack, and it will require MDM. So, I mean, we're providing devices. We're providing so many devices. There's all these devices out there. It's to the point where one of my coworker actually said, we actually get charged for all of this MDM licenses. So maybe everybody with a phone we don't need to give MDM to, and it's only the people who can't remember the gosh darn passcode. But it will be a requirement according to our security before you get on the network internally. Period.
No,
before you check mail.
We're
period.
moving to mail. So anything that BYOD, but anything that gets mailed will now have the MDM. So it's almost like we're full management, almost there.
We have it so that once you join the Wi-Fi, prompts you to install the profile. It calls you in the front key. Very nice. So pushes some profiles that you're good to go.
We haven't set the auto profile for us yet, but it's not. My company trusts our
Sure.
staff.
Okay, so I think back to my
That's a good
original
balance.
question about logging. Maybe it's more about monitoring. So you have an MDM, you can auto enroll in case. This MDM, even with they bring their own device, right? Yeah. So now do you go back off and at some point run reports and see how many people are using these devices, how many people have logged into whatever?
We just make sure that they have their email and the apps that we want email logs, stuff like that. We're really light on device management. So if the device gets lost, that's when we're back.
Who supports these people? I mean, that's.
Both of me.
I'm a new employee. I have my iOS device. I bring my own device. I log in. I get the profile. 2 weeks later, something goes wrong with my that I bought and paid for myself.
Yeah.
You're doing some work.
But it's mostly little questions here. So the biggest thing we get is, are you tracking me? Why are you tracking me?
Right?
Yeah.
That's what I'm spending my time doing.
Yeah,
I mean, Meraki has a
Is that
solution
component location data?
Yes.
it does.
if you install the agent. Meraki as a solution can send its logging out somewhat efficiently, and it's even got integration to packet capture services.
Mhm.
If you want to be able to know all of those moving parts in your network of what's happening, that's not MDM specific, it's Meraki, it's implementation specific, but therefore it makes me feel like if there was people finding that MDM data was valuable to send to something like Splunk, to aggregate those logs and therefore do reporting on them, the potential could be there. It's just that people would need to, bubble up the need to Meraki as a management system.
Yeah, so I'm in full agreement with this that Rich just put in chat. And if I haven't said this before, I'm just going to read this. His statement: enforcing passcodes on your iOS devices means that encryption turns on. So yes, if you're not using a passcode on your iOS device,
Enforcing
you're
complex passcode.
bananas. Yeah,
Complex. Because on the pin code it doesn't.
right.
No.
But
Yeah,
so even basic
Sorry?
passwords.
On the pin code, if you use a pin,
Saying the 4-digit code is useless.
it's not
Right.
encrypted.
It's not encrypted.
I thought it was.
I think it's only when you're using complex.
I don't know. That might have
So,
changed.
so
Yeah.
the device
But not
itself,
any passcode, but
Yeah.
the 4-digit passcode in itself is kind of flawed.
Yes,
Right.
sure, but
Pulling
the
data
point is
out of the
an encrypted
document.
file system. That's the real. So, in my opinion, it's worth enforcing passcodes for that alone. Have a guest Wi-Fi network and ensure that the only access to your internal system is via VPN. That I'm mostly, but definitely passcodes. I don't know how people do iOS without passcodes. Like even like.
if I leave it at home all the time, I do not want to use a passcode on it.
Depends what's on the device.
Even with like a prompt, the app that has the last thing I SSH to stored, it doesn't have the passcode to it stored.
Sure. Do you have email on that device?
Yeah.
Okay, passcode, or you're bananas, because then I get your device and I can email anybody. Go, hey, I'm Alistair.
I'm in London, and I'm in London, and I
Yeah,
lost
I
my.
don't remember my password. Hey, Alistair's bank, can you please reset my password? I'm Alistair.
Just if somebody's going to break into my house, I'm not certain that I'm worried about my email account on the device.
Yeah.
I'm going to have it wiped when it hits a network, and then if it hits a network that they're going to
When
mail
you
and
find
say
out,
that I'm in London, then they're not going to
Someone
be able
breaks
to
into
actually
my
send
house,
the
the
message.
iPad's going to be
At
the
least
last
not
on
with
my list of
ASME.
things to steal.
I don't know. It seems like such a simple thing to do.
I want to use my iPad more. I don't want to have
And that's
the
stopping
even that as the littlest thing.
What about when they
Change
put
the
Touch
logic
ID in?
When they put
Yeah,
Touch
yeah.
ID in, I'll definitely have a passcode on it.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
that's increased adoption of just
Yeah.
locking the device down hugely on 5S.
Super.
You can
Feature, yeah.
change your the time it takes for it to lock. So like
Yeah.
for the lock, so you
The
can
grace
just set
period.
it, you could put it in there, have it set for like 10 minutes. So that way, as long as you're using it, then
As long as somebody doesn't break in and steal it while
Yeah.
you're in the bathroom or something.
Right. Which is very unlikely.
Yeah.
I will also tell you, this is also another huge tangent, but just getting a keyboard for an iPad has made all the difference in the world in using this.
I was going to ask you which
Logic,
that was.
it's,
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's like the best keyboard in the world, but it's, you don't get that clunky soft keyboard taking up half the screen. And
That's the biggest problem.
yeah, so now it's like, oh, I will actually use this now.
Like trying to order food or anything like that. As soon as that keyboard pops up,
Yeah.
I'm like, let me just get my keyboard.
Right, yeah. Or even just typing documents or
Yeah.
answering email or whatever.
As soon as I realize I want to start a second sentence of my email, I need you to like cancel.
I just
go
go
to the
draft it,
computer.
that way do it on the computer, exactly. So, but that's made all the difference. Anyway. We're off that. The last thing I wanted to kind of ask about was Swift. So whether it was a month ago or 2 months ago, I guess it was last month, Apple announced Swift. We had one of these meetings, and I asked about Swift, and everyone seemed really excited. Oh, now I'm going to start programming. And I don't know. Like, the more I look at Swift, the more I like Objective-C. It's very, to call Swift Objective-C without a C is a totally disservice. To think that it's, at least from my perspective, to say that it's easier than Objective-C, I don't see that at all for anyone who's looked at it. But I was curious. So a lot of people seemed really jazzed up about it. Has anyone actually started looking at tutorials or documents and learning Swift?
Tried this playground once.
Yeah.
It was
Just
beta.
The data bits are very beta.
Yeah. I read the user guide, played around a little bit in the playground, but other than that, not really.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not a coder, just kind of starting to delve deeper into the shell scripting thing, so I'll just stick with one thing at a time.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I mean, I would if there was an easier way to understand Cocoa frameworks, I think that would be more helpful for people who haven't even gotten into Objective-C
I think
yet.
that's a big piece of it, right? Like, you're not getting away from Cocoa, so that's still a big piece of it. All that, I can't imagine they're going to convert all their documentation over to Swift very quickly, so you still need to know Objective-C to some extent, just to read documentation and things like that. Yeah, I don't know. I was just curious. Everyone's just so jazzed up about Swift. Better replace Python.
I'll be excited to see what people who what people produce with it. So people who have produced exceptional products in the past. I'm excited to see what kind of things come out of that.
I mean, they're
Like,
inherently going to.
Someone writes it.
I mean, it's just kind of cool to see what someone does with a different set of tools.
Except if it's Java.
Yeah.
That's all.
To an extent.
Or
if
TK.
If smaller development houses are able to produce the quality of output that you typically would only get with a much larger organization doing the coding, I mean, it gives you certain
What's
abilities.
stopping them now? Objective-C? That's crazy.
Well, all right, maybe it's not Objective-C, but if you're talking about some of the, I don't think it comes into something that we would use, that this group would typically use a language like Python or Bash scripting for. But when you're going to do something like create a game, for example, right? The part of it that they were actually showing off during WWDC was mostly how you could do these animations. You could have an object follow a path that might have been very difficult to do with Objective-C, for example. That whole thing they showed off with a balloon bobbing back and forth, very 2D kind of a world, but that would take a lot of work to do in something like Objective-C. At least the last time I was tinkering with Objective-C.
Why? Because I'm assuming most of that stuff you just hand off to Sprite.
Right, the framework
So,
itself.
Anyway, but I was just curious because everyone seems so jazzed up about it. You know, it's very fast moving if you've been following.
Oh yeah.
At each drop of the data. Yeah, there's like, oh well, there's this whole new feature and this whole thing has changed, and like, so.
Yeah, I only think
kind of
that's
interesting. I just I'm surprised they didn't use it internally to Apple for some period of time before saying, hey, let's open this up to people outside. Because that would have been sort of the cauldron that shaped it for a bit, and they would have realized a lot of these things, perhaps.
Like having iOS 8 come out with Swift support or whatever, but
it will.
not.
Oh yeah, it will.
Well, that's what I'm saying. But
I mean,
you're
if
talking
they've
about
planned it,
I'm
that
just
you
talking
can
about
submit
No,
notes to the
I'm
store.
aware, but I'm talking about the only way for Apple to test it would have been essentially to not put Swift out until some ways into iOS 8's deployment, or wait till
Timing-wise?
iOS 9,
Yeah,
Yeah.
just so that they have a sufficient amount of time to start rewriting their own apps in it, or
Right, and that's the thing. That's the real barometer for me. Is like, when is Apple going to actually start shipping their own frameworks and all their own stuff? They said, when they made the announcement, like, we wrote the WWDC, app in Swift, and it really wasn't. It was like one class or like one controller or some very small piece of the overall app that was written in Swift. So
the Spolsky rule is they're not going to rewrite any apps. They shouldn't rewrite necessarily any apps.
but when we get new when we get new frameworks, see what they're written. You know, they made the announcement about Swift, and the very same day we got an announcement about Metal, which was a C-based framework. Now, you know, Swift, it's Objective-C without the C, because we hate C. Oh, and here's a C framework.
Yeah. So and here's this other cool thing.
Here's this other, and Metal is really awesome, right? So, you know, C is not going away.
Is Per still away? Per could tell us about his experience with
Sure,
with
if
Swift.
it feels like talking about Swift and what he continues to like or dislike about it.
Or is he still trying to be quiet for? Hey.
No, there he goes.
Hey there.
Hey.
No, I actually haven't been using Swift for a couple of weeks now.
No, why?
I experimented a lot with the Beta 1 and Beta 2, but after that I've just been on vacation. I mean, I've been reading the blog posts, but I haven't really done any work with it.
Are you still Are you still excited about the future of Swift? I think that's the.
Oh yeah, no, it's a great language, but it's become obvious that it's actually a pretty complex language. I mean,
right.
I've been using C for almost 20 years. You have a lot of experience. The tools are mature. Everything just works. If it doesn't work, you can Google it. And with Swift, it's
on Google.
Yeah.
I mean, the compiler crashes still.
Right. I mean, C is really well understood, and it's not going away.
Yeah, so it's very beta. I mean, it's kind of exciting. I'm a bit of a compiler and language nerd. So, I mean, it's fun to watch a language being born, growing up. But I mean, it's not going to be ready for production for at least a year.
Right. No, I mean, I agree. It is fun to watch this sort of sort itself out and watch people outside of Apple, outside of the the creator of the language, have an impact on it. I think that's really exciting.
Yeah, he has a lot more open source roots.
Right, which we all are hoping that Swift gets open source. Which that would be nice. But I think Per said the same thing I did in terms of it's turning out to be a rather complex language. There's a lot of complexity and subtleties to it that that sort of belie the original, like, oh, everyone's in the program now. It's easier than Objective-C. I'm really not convinced it's easier than Objective-C. It depends on what you want to do with it and how hard it is Objective-C. Maybe, but if you can learn Swift, you can learn Objective-C. It's really the APIs that trip everyone up. It's usually not the language, right? It's the APIs. And like Go can also on its own sort of
as a framework.
Yeah, tricky.
But it's also like they're not going to say, "Hey, EA, come before the iPhone event." This is learning an entirely new beta, fresh programming language. So you can't get outside perspectives yet. When they wanted to keep it close to the chest, they wanted to be able to somewhat fully bake it, and now we're still in this period of like, will it pick up? Will it stabilize?
Right.
Will it be everything that they were kind of hoping it would be? And Go gets used every single day in production. Hip hop at Facebook gets used every single day in production. Like they're getting battle tested to heck because they have to stand up like that. Rust, I don't know how much. Haskell, I don't know how much. Like the more complex languages for people who are into languages for, those complex purposes. They have complex ends they need to get to.
Yeah.
This is another thing that does have a complex end it needs to be able to fulfill because it wants full feature compatibility.
All right. I was just curious how everyone was still, if they were excited about Swift or if it drifted away.
When Graham does a series of blog posts on it, I'm sure it'll be ready for me.
Wow. All right. So just before we
to.
wrap up, I just want to mention that Rich posted in the chat about the encryption based on this Apple KBase article. Apple doesn't distinguish between simple and complex passcodes for enabling encryption.
Correct.
As iOS security guides also says, by setting up a device passcode, the user automatically enables data protection.
Yeah.
iOS supports 4-digit and arbitrary length alphanumeric passwords.
They also, though, say the stronger the encryption key becomes,
Sure.
the stronger your password,
Yes.
the stronger your encryption.
It's like Assault,
becomes.
though.
Yeah.
But the device itself has encryption at the disk level.
The file system level.
So-
you
Right.
want your file system encrypted. That's
Anyway.
the key.
So saying without a passcode, it does not have
Questions
encryption.
before we wrap up? Bring your questions next time. You're saying you're just getting your feet wet with the MacAdmin stuff. That's what we're here for. So
Since January. Get my feet wet since January.
Pool's
I
really
Well,
really
I've
deep.
love it a
been
lot, though.
using Monkey
Alright.
since January.
Thanks
Yeah.
again, everybody.
Pool's really deep, man.